I work at the Open University on a project called the Floodplain Meadows Partnership, and we are interested in how very rare species-rich plant communities respond to changes in the floodplain system. We're standing on a floodplain here next to a river, and water levels rise and fall according to the changes in the weather. How do plants respond to that? And one of the species that we're interested in is a very rare plant called the snake's head fritillary, and that's found on less than 20 sites in the UK where it's considered to be wild. And there's one site in particular called North Meadow in Wiltshire, which is a national nature reserve, which holds 80% of the UK's population. And we've been monitoring that site using volunteers since 1999. And the way that we monitor is to get our very accurate GPS to relocate 200 positions across the meadow, and at each of those 200 positions our volunteers record what the plants are doing in a 1 by 1 metre square. So you can see that that generates an awful lot of very detailed scientific information. We had several questions that have arisen as part of all this work. One of them is, what happens to the snake's head fritillary if the bumblebee declines, as is widely reported that it is doing? Another question we had was, are the population changes that we're seeing on North Meadow replicated on some of the other sites that have snake's head fritillaries? And we also wanted to understand whether our volunteers' data was scientifically rigorous. Could we rely on it to understand this population ecology properly? So we took advantage of the eSTEeM call to put in a project to expand our counts to 2 other sites, to establish some bumblebee surveys working with the Bumblebee Conservation Trust, and to do an assessment of our volunteers' data to see how statistically accurate it was. We also wanted to understand our volunteer engagement. So do our volunteers come back year on year? How can you establish new volunteer groups? And what do they feel about the whole thing? Are they learning something from it? We worked very closely with 2 wildlife trusts, the Herefordshire Wildlife Trust, who own part of the Lug Meadows in Herefordshire, and the Wiltshire Wildlife Trust, who own a site called Clattinger Farm. We chose those 2 sites because the wildlife trusts were very interested in what we were doing, and also because they had 2 different approaches to a possible count. So the Herefordshire Wildlife Trust already ran a family fritillary day where they opened the meadow and they took people on guided walks around the site. And one of the things that they did as part of that was my handy prop. They got the kids to make these lovely snake's head fritillary flowers out of an egg box, a pipe cleaner and a piece of bamboo cane. And it's a really nice little example of the kids actually looking at what they're seeing and having a go at making it. It's been a really, really interesting project so far, and it is of course ongoing because part of the point of it is to have long-term monitoring on these sites. But one of the really interesting things we've found is that where you have extreme events, the population responds as you would expect in a way, but not always as you would expect. But what we've also found, because of course we're now comparing 3 sites, is that the plant changes slightly its behaviour depending on the nature of the hydrology of the site. So on the Lug Meadows, which is a bit wetter, it's a bit more of a stable plant community. On the Clattinger Farm, which is a bit drier, when the year has been a bit drier, they struggle a bit more. When the year has been a bit wetter, they do better. So we're starting to learn more about how the plant responds to different soil water levels, and that's really unknown information in the scientific community. So they are producing genuinely new information for us. The other thing that we wanted to do was find out about the statistical validity of our volunteers. So we've been doing 15% recounts on all of our sites and all the quadrats. And what we've found is that our volunteers are statistically good. Their data is as good as the scientists, and we know we can use it in scientific papers. It's been a really interesting process looking at how the volunteers respond to the project and who comes back and who doesn't, because we started to record obviously who's surveying on which sites, who's coming to workshops, and what impact we're having on getting volunteers to come back year after year. And what the data is showing us is that we have a small core of volunteers who come back year after year after year, regardless of what happens on the count days, regardless of whether there's 5 plants or 1,800 plants. They just really want to be part of the project. But we've asked them questions about how much they've learnt from the project, and about 90% of them say that they've learnt skills that they didn't have before the project. About 90% of them say they've learnt more about the ecology of floodplain meadows before the project, and about 50% of them say they want to get involved in other aspects of the project. So I think we can say that we've had an impact on our volunteers. We have a really good group of volunteers at North Meadow who've been coming back year after year, and what we really want to do is spread that resilience to the other 2 sites so that we can establish groups that come come back on those other 2 sites year after year as well. And I think we can do that by running our winter workshops and feeding back information to them to make them feel like they're part of a really good scientific project.